Okay, let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers, a team that 2 years ago went to overtime in the Super Bowl before ultimately losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year, they missed the playoffs altogether. How can they get back on track? Well, first, you have to talk about where they're at, cap space-wise, draft picks-wise, and all that stuff, and then we can talk about where should they go from here. Well, let's look at their cap space first to kind of get a feel for where they're at. In 2025, they have 44 million in cap space, although it actually goes down to 17 million in 2026. Here's a very notable thing to talk about. Who is a free agent in 2026? Well, you have Brock Purdy, who is currently going to be in the last year of his deal in 2025. That is where this kind of whole thing has to start. Brock Purdy, you have another year of him making basically no money. A following season, you might get a situation where you have to pay him. There's ways you can make that work. So, like, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles, they are currently actually paying Jalen Hurts his big contract when they won the Super Bowl. Wait, a team won a Super Bowl with a quarterback getting a big deal? That almost never happens. Well, it was the first year of his deal on a backloaded contract. Most contracts are backloaded. So you might actually get 2 good years of cheap Brock Purdy play if you decide to pay him. Of course, there's the question of, do you decide to pay him? We can touch on that more at the end of this video. But that's kind of where they're at right now. Definitely a bit pressing to make sure they can get it done in the next couple years. As for their upcoming free agents, they got some players. They got some players that they're going to want to keep. Tre'Davious Ward's been a really good corner for them. Dre Greenlaw obviously got hurt in the Super Bowl. So the number next to these guys' names is how many millions of dollars they're projected to get in free agency. His is only $6 million. The reason is because of the injury. If that might be one you just keep and hope he can stay healthy. That is kind of what the Niners tend to like to do, is pay guys and then hope that they can stay healthy. Who have Hufanga, who's also had an injury a couple years ago, but is a really good safety for them. He's an all-pro. Aaron Banks has been a good offensive lineman. Javon Hargrave's an interesting one. He got that huge deal with San Francisco, was, I thought, really good 2 years ago, but then only played 100 snaps before getting hurt this year. Devondre Campbell, I think they probably, if I had to guess, let Campbell walk and just re-sign Dre Greenlaw, but we'll see what happens. The reality is, though, with this list, I mean, these are key players. Like, there's some big name free agents that they are going to let walk if they do not re-sign these guys. Like I said, they have the money to realistically re-sign everybody on this list if they wanted to, so they're not in an awful situation. And I almost wonder, do you just say, we're keeping Tre'Davious Ward, we're keeping Hufanga, we're keeping Dre Greenlaw, we'll let Campbell walk, and we'll let Hargrave walk, and then either sign Banks or replace him, whatever you want to do, and then let's just kind of keep the team that was here essentially 2 years ago, with the exception of Hargrave. Or maybe you re-sign Hargrave because he'd be on a cheap deal. I don't know. You look at where they ranked in terms of PFF grades for each positional category last year. The passing was 20th, but again, Brock Purdy got hurt. And that's kind of one thing that we have to mention is, could this team just be better at, like, staying healthy? Receiving core was still 6th best. You have the offensive line actually graded pretty well according to PFF. 11th best pass blocking, 3rd best run blocking. Running was middle of the road this year because obviously McCaffrey was hurt. And then for defense, the run defense graded out pretty bad. Pass rush was okay, and coverage was great. So maybe what you try and do is just add an interior defensive lineman to replace Hargrave, and then you could potentially try and, re-sign some of the guys, keep your defense good, that was good outside of that, good, and hope you just get healthier in 2025. It's not a horrible thought. It's worth mentioning as well, they have an extra draft pick. They have an extra 3rd round pick this year, and they didn't trade away any of their picks. So they're picking 1 through 7 to get a little bit of better draft capital from having a down season, although not quite like when they had everyone get hurt and they picked 2nd overall and got Nick Bosa. But still, you have a little bit more draft capital. You have ways to build up this roster. And I think if you have a player that you really feel like is a valuable piece to this defense, keep the player, or offense, keep the player. Don't let guys walk out the door, because I think it would be a mistake for San Francisco to say, hey, we're good for a while. We're going to be competitive for a while. We have a lot of young players. We're good, because of the Brock Purdy thing. And I think that's something we have to discuss, is they now, if they want to, could sign Brock Purdy to a long extension this offseason. Is that what you want to do? Because the downside, of course, of not signing him is, well, he could play really well and you could have to pay him more. Quarterback contracts tend to go up every year when the cap goes up, so there's that concern. In most sports, you would have the concern of if you let someone play on the last year of their deal, that means they could become a free agent and then you could lose them for nothing. Football, it's not quite that way because you have the franchise tag, and for a position as important as the quarterback, you're going to make sure that if you have to tag him, you would tag him. So that's not as big of a deal. And to me, I kind of feel like because you have the tag, that's something you should focus on. And of course, Brock Purdy could not sign the tag, but then that usually doesn't happen. You could have a Le'Veon Bell situation, but that's very rare. You would assume that he would use the tag. And if I'm the 49ers, I kind of think that's what I do. I feel like I'm pretty pro Brock Purdy. I'm actually one of the few people that thought he got better last year. Just the situation around him got a lot worse. He still puts the ball in harm's way a bit too much for my liking, but is still pretty good in the Shanahan scheme. And we've never really seen someone in the Shanahan scheme be so good when a play breaks down to be able to make stuff work. And whether you love Purdy or hate Purdy, he's certainly a great fit for this scheme. I think the concern you have to have is, okay, you're competitive now with him making essentially no money. What happens when he makes a big amount of money? What happens when you look at the list of Tre'Davious Ward and Hufanga and Greenlaw, and you basically say, you know what, we can't re-sign any of those guys because we're paying Brock Purdy? What happens then, just for an example? Can he carry a team that doesn't have a great defense? That's the question. I would just like to give it another year, and I think teams should be more paying attention to this. Now, if Purdy wants to sign a Baker Mayfield deal, if he says, hey, you know what, I don't want to play on a tag or risk anything like that, I haven't made a huge contract, just give me a 3-year, $110 million deal. I actually would quite like that, and I think that I wouldn't hate doing something like that. It's the weird thing where, like, when someone like Baker Mayfield or Geno Smith are successful, because they weren't successful with their original team, they don't get the massive $50+ million deal or even $60 million that Dak Prescott did. But when you're great with your original team, a lot of times guys pay you more, part of that is age too. But yeah, I mean, I think I would not give Brock Purdy a $60 million a year, 4-year extension, the way we've seen other teams kind of give out those similar types of contracts. So that's kind of where I'm at. But also I would say, hey, like, I think you got a year or two of being really good. I think this year is the one year you kind of know you have Purdy on a cheap deal. I'd say go for it. I wouldn't even hate trading away a draft pick to try and be better, try and get some extra talent, and really go for it this year. I know you missed the playoffs, but like, the Philadelphia Eagles had a horrible, end to the season last year where they lost, they started 10-1, they lost a bunch of games, lost in the first round of the playoffs, and then they won the Super Bowl the following year. It can happen. That's pretty much the exact same trajectory that the 49ers are on now. But now, what did the Eagles do? Well, they added a lot of free agents and they drafted really well. Got the right coaching staff. The Niners have a good coaching staff. They just got to draft well, just got to add good pieces. That's kind of what I think about all of this. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from ya. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.